Hi, so my name is Carolina and I am here at the beautiful Purple Valley. Finally, after 3 years, we have again opened up the doors for both teachers and students. And I guess that before I start with this interview with Ginseng John.
You can
Ginseng?
call me John.
No, John. Ginseng.
That's like a Chinese herbal tea.
I know, but you know, it sounds actually a little bit like Chinese when I pronounce it. No, with John and Marta and Isa, I actually just wanted to say thank you very much for all the support that all of you gave us during the extremely difficult time when we were going through COVID. I hope that many of you see this interview. I wanted to let you know that together with all the support from the Purple Valley community, we actually managed to get £20,000.
Wow.
It's quite a lot of money, actually.
Congratulations.
Yeah, it was fantastic. And I don't think that you all realize how much each and every single donation actually helped us, the people that are working here at Purple Valley and the people that are connected to our staff. So thank you so very much for that. Yeah. Thank you. So I'm sitting here together with John and Marta and Isabella. And John and Marta and Isabella, well, I met Marta quite many years ago, actually, in 2014.
Almost 10 years ago.
Yeah. Fantastic with the colors.
She will be doing a side interview with you.
Yeah, you can show us the colors. You can paint here. You want to paint? Here.
My Baba.
Yeah, so Marta and I, we met already in 2014 when you were here at the Purple Valley. And then we didn't see each other for a very long time.
Yes.
And then last year, you both came, actually in Jan, I think, last year in
March.
2022, March. You came to Tenerife. And then we met. And we invited you to come to Purple Valley as students for Tim and Sai. And now here you are.
It's a great honor for us to be coming here, in fact, back to India together after more than 3 years since pandemic.
Yeah, already our trip to Tenerife was our long postponed honeymoon.
Yeah.
We got married 2 years prior and we couldn't travel due to COVID. So we thought like we really deserve a proper yoga vacation.
Yeah.
So that's why we stayed for almost a month in Tenerife, and it was beautiful connection with Europe and with other practitioners and teachers after such a long time.
And being in India right now, it's so essential for us as teachers to, in a way, fill our cups because we're all the time giving. So just to be a student, to focus on the practice, and it's quite nourishing and fulfilling. Yeah. So we are thankful and grateful to be here.
Yeah, it has been fantastic to have you both here together with Isa. And yesterday Isa turned 2.
Yes.
And she had started to talk a lot.
Yes, when we were in Tenerife, she started walking a year ago, and now she started verbalizing her needs and desires very profoundly. Yeah, it's a beautiful blessing, and yesterday she celebrated her 2nd birthday, which was also amazing to have so many people around us, so many practitioners to celebrate
40 people
her.
singing happy birthday.
It's orange. It's orange. It's an orange color. Do you want to show us how we are painting with this orange and green color there on there in your little book? Perhaps you can make a sound and some flowers. Yeah. So we decided. Oh, did your mommy paint this?
I think it was Daddy actually.
And who is this? Is this Krishna?
Supposed to be Shiva.
Oh, it's supposed to be Shiva. Okay. Sorry for that.
Snake around the neck and the third eye.
Okay, yeah, that's true. Yeah, so we decided to have, so we invited you to Purple Valley in Goa, and over here we actually started to talk about our new project that we are planning to have in the off season. So we are planning to keep Purple Valley open for the first time, and therefore we invited John and Marta to come and join us as teachers. And due to the fact that we have a quite big Purple Valley community and Purple Valley following, I felt that it would be really nice to know a little bit more about you as teachers and perhaps also as humans in general. So of course the first obvious question must be then, how did you come to yoga?
Most
came
asked
to
question
us.
to
And
all yoga practitioners.
just to interrupt you here, I heard that you have a quite interesting story.
We both
know, I
have
think
quite different stories,
stories, I
very
would say.
different. And
Maybe you should begin with your story.
I can start with mine. Yeah. I haven't thought about it how to share, but I think I found yoga through the philosophy and a little more meditative and spiritual approach. So when I was in my teenage years, around 16, I was kind of a bookworm person. So I was not very outgoing and partying and meeting friends. I would rather sit home and read. And then one day in a bookshop, I came across the collection of books by Osho, Rajneesh. And I started reading and I was like, wow, that's something beautiful that he's speaking about. Like, that's the depth. And I was reading, and then I came across Hatha yoga classes in my city in Poznań, where I was born and where I grew up. So I decided to join, and that's how it all started rolling, very, very gradually, by attending Iyengar and Hatha classes twice a week, and then slowly adding on 3 times a week. After a few years, joining Ashtanga classes and traveling to India, adding on Vipassana meditation to my practice, adding on pranayama, and then joining the actual Mysore classes when I moved to Germany as a student. So it was like a very, very slow and long and gradual process of yoga kind of making its way into me through like one drop after another. And it was really helpful because I was naturally never a really strong or bendy person. I was more of a noodle body type and not really connected to my body, not very aware of the body. So this practice completely helped me to connect and to understand, to find my path in a way. So that was something that was always there with me, and the process of shifting from the student to the teacher was also very gradual and kind of intuitive. And it's been a beautiful journey.
So you mentioned that you tried out quite many different yogas or forms of yoga before you kind of came to Ashtanga.
I mostly stick to Iyengar practice because that's what was back there in my hometown. We didn't have much of Ashtanga in early 2000 in Poland. So I was doing mainly what was available, and back then yoga was considered in Poland as something a little weird, like people didn't really know what it was. So when I started attending yoga classes, my mom was quite scared, like, is it some sect? Is it something like, we are Christians and maybe it's not right to do it? But then after, I think, a year or two, she joined me. And she's been also practicing Iyengar style until today. She's in her late 60s and she loves it. So I think that was a good step and that was a good direction. And I think what kind of made me search for that depth is that I always thought that being brought up in a Christian environment, without being asked, like, is it really the belief system that you want to follow? I rejected it quite early, but then I felt like something is missing, like some sort of devotion, some sort of spirituality is kind of lacking in me, like we can't just focus on the materialism and external life. So that was always this aspect of the practice that kept me close to it and that made me quite devoted to it for like more than 15 years now.
I can actually recognize myself a little bit in that, because when I was growing up in Warsaw, I was actually the only one in my family going to church, and I was very, very devoted to church. My father, my mother were atheists. My mom would go to church sometimes, but it was more kind of for the sake of the community. But then when I stopped my church, how do you call it, my church period or the Christian period, I was also lacking a kind of spiritual part.
And connection with group, the Sangha, that's what's the most beautiful in Ashtanga. Like wherever we travel, we find fellow Ashtangis and we're like an extended family. And I think this aspect is something that we really all look for. Like if we think like why humanity invented religions. I mean,
Yeah.
we just needed it. We need to believe that there is something more powerful, stronger than us. Especially we realize it when, you know, we start getting sick or we get unlucky or we, you know, approach the end of life. People usually turn back towards religion because we need this belief that there is something more powerful than us.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's what Ashtanga or any other practice, it's not only about Ashtanga, be it meditation or pranayama or other asana, physical style, or karma yoga or bhakti yoga is what it all has in common, this beautiful Sangha. And that's what I think we also, John and I, love the most in our practice, in our home shala, this sense of community, of belonging, you know, and the faith that there is always something stronger than us.
And John, your story?
My story of how yoga found me.
Yeah.
I was lucky in certain ways because yoga found me, or I found yoga when I was in my school when I was young, 9 years old, I would say. So this was like any other physical activity that was introduced in our school, co-curriculum activity, like kids took up karate, Bharatanatyam, and this and that, and I was fascinated by one of these demonstrations in my school where they had this kids up on the stage doing various different asanas like Urdhva Dhanurasana, the wheel, one person standing on them and doing a little bit of acrobatic kind of a way, but I was immediately hooked onto it. But it was anything but acrobatic is what I initially realized at such a young age, because I had a wonderful teacher back then called Prakash. So I practiced with him for I think about 6-7 years until end of my school days. And that's how I started yoga, you know, in such a tender age of 9 years up until my 10th grade. But then later it evolved and changed in many different ways, because I had good 6-7 years of break where I did not do any form of yoga when I was in my college, just exploring life and all its various forms that it has to offer. And later after that, again, yoga found me. I didn't find yoga. That's how I would like to put it, because I was initiated into this ashram gurukul kind of a system to teach yoga, not like today's teacher training program, but rather go under a tutelage of many teachers and learn waking up early morning, sitting and chanting sutras and pranayama, and basically learning to teach within these months that I was living in this ashram. And
Was this something that you chose to do yourself?
no, it came to me.
How? Well, can you explain that a little bit, how it came to you?
Yeah, it's like, so after my college, I was, like, you can say I was loafing around for 6 months, didn't want to do any of this normal IT jobs, which is what back where I'm from in Bangalore, everyone ends up doing. And one of my neighbor's husband is a recruiter. He told me that there seems to be a job interview which you might be interested of, and I think you should go try it out. And out of curiosity, I just went without even knowing what this job was. It was job interview for yoga trainees to get trained with this master who spent spent many years living in the Himalayas from age 4 to 18, learning and practicing yoga. So it was like this opportunity where many kids could go and be there. And I think he trained, the batch that I got trained was the second batch that he trained after a 10 years break. The first batch was 10 years before us. And there were about 15 to 18 kids who came for interview. I was one of the 3 who got selected. And I still remember the interview was quite bizarre. I don't know if I should get into details with that.
Yeah, I would like to hear that.
I think it's all very interesting and unique.
So the interview was not in a normal setup of office, rather in a huge mansion or a villa in the outskirts of Bangalore, Old Airport Road. And after we were chosen, 3 of us who could go to meet the guy, the master, you can call it. He was out in the veranda cooking something, and he sits there and immediately he sees me. He tells me that, where were you all this while? I was waiting for you. You were in my past life. And I mean, imagine a 20, 21-year-old kid hearing this. You'll be like, what is this guy talking about? It was very bizarre to me in many ways. But even funnily, what he said was, he called his people and he said, this is a new trainee. Please take him inside and make him join our training group. That's the ashram that was set up. So they took me inside and they offered me beer.
Beer?
Yeah. And I go home and tell my mom, I found my job. Because I used to love drinking beer back then. And,
Sitting on the
Really?
veranda and drinking beer with the boss.
can you believe it? I mean, how life works in a mysterious ways, and that's how I actually got into teaching yoga.
So who's the guru?
He's quite of a unique soul. He's a character. I don't know. My words will fall short because he has touched many people's lives in ways that is shocking. People follow him wholeheartedly. He's got that energy that he carries, the persona, you can say, in certain ways. But funnily, we had to part ways because it eventually turned out to be slightly cultish organization where I still remember, used to teach about 10, 12 classes a day. So these classes were not in one location. I was based in Delhi back then. So the classes were spread between Delhi, Noida, and Gurgaon on a particular day. So the traveling was crazy. And with these travels, there were about 10, 12 classes, which was quite hectic. And not only that, we were getting paid peanuts for that. So yeah, eventually, while I was teaching, but nonetheless, this was a great exposure for me to understand how magical and powerful this practice of yoga is and how it can impact people's life in many ways. And that re-emphasized my own belief of how this yoga practice is the life that I want to be living. And having so many classes a day, I met people from all different walks of life and people with all sorts of abilities and disabilities that come along with it. And that gave me the exposure to open my own eyes of what yoga truly can be used in the right way. But yes, even during this time period of teaching for 3 years with the master, that's when I found Ashtanga. And yeah, I totally fell in love with it. I started practicing watching YouTube videos online. Then later went to Kerala, and then met my teacher Ajay Tokas in Delhi. And then I've made yearly trips to Mysore and never turned back. That's long story short. I still condensed it a lot, but
That's amazing.
yeah,
Interesting stories, both of you. Thank you so much for sharing. Marta, I have one more question with regards to you. So where did you get in touch with Ashtanga? Because you said that you had, as I said before, you had tried different forms of yoga.
Yeah, so one of my Iyengar teachers, she also happened to teach this guided Ashtanga classes because there was no Mysore back then in Poznań. And she said, Marta, go and try. You should enjoy it. You know, I was in my almost early 20s, I think. And I went for this lead full primary Ashtanga class where they used to turn on the heaters, so it gets even more intense.
Ashtanga with heaters?
Yeah,
Wow.
very hot
Must be
Ashtanga.
intense.
So I remember I went through the sun salutations and I was breathless. And then there were the standing postures and I thought I will faint and die. And then we sat down and I was like, I think it's been like 60 minutes. It must be over now. And then the whole seated sequence started.
Just the beginning.
So after the class, I felt like literally, as if someone put me into the washing machine and turned over on a very high speed. But something kept me going back. I don't know what it was, but something told me like, maybe this is good for me. Maybe the challenging and this difficulty is what will help me grow. We all know that we don't like things that challenge us and we don't like things that we are bad at. And I was really bad at that, if you can use these words related to yoga. And for many years, the primary series was really challenging for me. I struggled physically, I struggled with the breath, I struggled with the endurance, and most of all with the strength. But I kept noticing some change, and I kept noticing that if I go through this class, then the rest of the day is very easy. Nothing can break me. So that was my main motive to continue for the first few years. And I still recall how when I moved to Germany, I was still continuing. That was around 2009. I started then attending the Mysore classes. And then I slowly gradually started switching from the evening classes to morning. And then the morning was even harder because the body is stiff, especially if you live in Germany where the winter can be very cold. And if your lifestyle is basically Monday to Friday, spending 9 to 10 hours in the office and then maybe going for a party Friday night or staying at work even longer. And then you add on this practice, body is really challenged because you're first immobile for so many hours. And then you try to bend yourself and twist your spine. And it was big hardship for me. But I somehow had this love-hate relationship and I felt like it's good for me. It's something I should be doing. So I've been doing it.
And what were you doing in Germany?
Sorry?
What were you doing in Germany?
I was architect. I worked as architect. The moment I graduated my university in Poland, I felt like Poland might not be a place for me. So I got this job opportunity in Berlin. And that was one of the reasons. Another was that there was a Mysore Shala, and I was really back then already curious to learn Mysore. I traveled, I think just before moving to Germany, I traveled to India, to Dehradun, and I attended Iyengar training with one of very dedicated teachers of Iyengar. And then I traveled to Pune. And for some reason, that trip made me realize that actually Ashtanga is my calling. I think because the Iyengar method was very intense and found it more difficult for my mind to be centered and to be brought into place while staying so long in the posture. While in Ashtanga method, when we move and we breathe, I think it's much easier to kind of control the mind and the flow of the thoughts. So that's why I then decided to stick to Ashtanga, and I've been doing it ever since, and I never stopped, and I hope I will never stop.
So then eventually both of you ended up in Mysore.
Both of us
you ended up in Mysore perhaps a little bit earlier than Marta?
I think actually the other way around.
The other way around.
Yeah.
I
But,
started
yeah,
traveling,
that's where we
I
met.
think, from 2013 to Mysore. And that was also why this shift was happening in me, because working as architect, I was not given the permission to leave for a month or two to India. So every time I wanted to go to India, I had to quit my job and then travel to India and then come back and realize, okay, I need money to sustain. So applying for another job and starting this journey again and again. So after a few years, I realized that I will not make a career as an architect, probably.
But and is it apparently the same time as you guys met?
We met
You met in Mysore?
2017.
So
So
was
that
it in
is,
Mysore?
I think, my fifth or sixth trip
It
to
was in the
Mysore.
coconut stand right
Yeah.
outside the shala.
Do you want me? Can you share a little bit of how you met and how you actually ended up being together?
Yeah,
Now.
of course. It's
I think that was kind of meant to happen. It was my fifth or sixth trip to Mysore. And actually that year I got my first authorization to teach. And we were not looking for each other, but we kind of ran into each other.
it was
We
this,
were-
I think it was quite evident for both of us, this strong sense of belonging or feeling that you know this somebody that you're looking at from some past life or this life, I don't know. There was immediately I saw a face, I felt like this is someone I know. Yeah, of course, she has a pretty face, but that aside, but yeah.
Yeah, we have both our lives back home, and we were both quite settled, and none of us was looking for anything new. But also to me, the moment I saw him, I mean, you see many handsome guys in Mysore and other places, you know, but it's normal. I mean, it's natural to see beautiful people of the same or opposite gender. But when I saw him, I also saw something really special, and I didn't know if he was from India or maybe from Brazil or any other place in the world. And I was like, I don't care, but I really want to meet this guy closer. Like, I really want to know something about him. And then, you know, usually when you practice in the same batch, then you go out of the shala, that was still the old shala in Gokulam, and you sit there on the bench and drink coconut. So I was always extending my period of drinking coconut to wait for him. And always, for some reason, our eyes would meet, you know. And then I think we had few common friends, and one day, it was maybe 3 or 4 days later after I saw him for the first time, I decided to approach and to ask him, would you go for a breakfast with me?
She took me for dosa to Idli Man.
We went to Idli Man. Yeah, there's this famous Idli Man a few streets away from where the shala was, and it was the second day when I had my new scooter. I was learning how to drive, but I thought now or never. So I took him behind.
Remember, the moment I sat behind, I knew she hasn't driven this bike efficiently, but I trusted my long legs. Baby also see Krupka. Okay.
And so
Yeah,
we went,
so-
and I asked him, what's your name? And he said, John. And I was like, how John? Like, how can you be John? Why wouldn't be a Krishna or Shiva or Nataraj or anything else? Why John? And I didn't want to believe him. But the funny thing is that from that day, people kept asking us, like, you're guys like really close to each other. You've been knowing each other for a very long time. We're like, no, we just spoke for the first time now. So I think there was from the very beginning something very special about the energy exchange between us. And yeah.
Yes, it was meant to be. You know, what's meant to be will always find you.
And then a week later, he went back to Singapore, where he moved 2 years prior. And I stayed 1 more month to practice. And then, yeah, we decided to be together.
So your Germany was exchanged.
Yeah,
For
so
Singapore.
for 1 more year, we stayed in touch through WhatsApp mainly. That was quite difficult for us after knowing each other for less than 2 weeks. But to me, it was very obvious that we have to be together, and no matter where he is and what he's doing, I have to go. And because that year I got authorized, I was planning to start my own shala in Berlin. But well, then we were evaluating, should he come to Berlin and should we teach together? Because I was still having my architecture job and teaching on the side. But I was kind of getting ready over the years for this switch to become a full-time teacher. And then we thought that Singapore is nicer because the weather is more beautiful there and people are
Weather is
nice.
boring.
And well, now after a few years. But when you're new and you're coming from Germany, I think it's very tempting to move to Southeast Asia, especially because it's closer to India. And for me, there was always this calling to be closer to India. And also, he's been teaching there for some time, so he was a little bit known and well respected. So we thought it would be nice to actually start a shala there because there we might be more needed because the yoga there is very commercialized and there is not much spirituality in yoga involved. Not so much of Mysore style and the traditional authentic way of the Evelyn practice that we share. So we thought that's a good ground to plant the seed.
So, John, did you already have a shala when Marta moved there?
No, I was actually teaching for another yoga studio there in Singapore, but I started a Mysore program there. And having done that, it was like having a certain goodwill to continue that Mysore program. And then once Martha was around, and it's not as easy as it was for her to move to Singapore. Of course, I'm still surprised by the fact that after spending a week with someone in Mysore and spending another year through a WhatsApp relationship, she quit her job, sold her car, and moved to Singapore all the way.
Shifted all my belongings to my parents. They're still there. And
Seemed to be the right decision still.
Many
years after.
Yeah, many years after. But then
it
it
took
eventually...
us some effort to establish ourselves because in order to work in Singapore, you need to be sponsored by a company. So he was working for a company for some time, very short. I also worked for a big yoga chain when I moved to Singapore, but then we thought like it's not, like I didn't come all the way there to work for another person and another big company.
It was a necessary path, but eventually it gave birth to a beautiful shala in Singapore called Nilayam, and it has evolved and grown organically with this flourishing, beautiful community of people who come together with a common mind to practice and to be one within that, which is so beautiful and which we are so honored to be part of. And so from Mysore to Singapore.
So tell me a little bit about the yoga community in Singapore and the yoga in Singapore. So how is it? Do you feel that it's differ from other places?
So Singapore is, I would like to refer to it like grown-up man's Disney World. There is, I think, like any other big city, it has a lot of stimulations. And yoga there is interpreted more towards the asana, not even asana, kind of a workout based is what people look at it. The spirituality is, like Martha mentioned before, is missing. So I guess it's the same. The stimulations which I mentioned earlier is there no matter in which part of the world you are in. And having a practice like Mysore and Ashtanga is kind of empowering the people to connect with their true nature. And it is very essential. And this yoga there has lost its charm, lost its meaning in translation because certain studios offer back-to-back classes starting from 6 a.m. all the way until 10 p.m. So people...
And students join 3-4 classes back to back.
And
hot yoga, then power yoga, then deep back bending, and then something else on top of that.
Sometimes they won't even know which teacher is conducting the class or what the class is. They just go back to back thoughtlessly.
I think it's related with the fact that the first yoga studio in Singapore was initiated by people who brought their knowledge from America. So it was, I think it was Bikram Yoga or the Hot Yoga, the first studio that opened in Singapore, and that's the one that still remains the most powerful, like the biggest corporation. It's like a big industry where they train new teachers almost constantly. So there are new and new students who don't have that much of experience and exposure, and majority of them never traveled to India, that start teaching and sharing and their best understanding. So that's why it's really losing its connection to the source. And for us both, the mission of our life is to bring this connection and bring this source and this spirituality and the understanding of, the philosophical texts and the essence of the practice back to people. And I think they respond beautifully, because we really managed to create out of people who, many of them were never related to yoga, but some of them have been practicing this back-to-back Vinyasa classes, and they love it. And surprisingly, they love chanting with us, and they love learning pranayama with us. And we meet occasionally for the Yoga Sutra study group, and they come to our house to spend time and talk about sutras. Which is like, wow, it's so beautiful. And it's very meaningful for us to see that our efforts and struggles every day bring some fruits. So it's a very fertile ground in Singapore, and I think it's beautiful potential, and we see it every day with new and new students coming and recommending the shala to their friends and growing every year. So
yeah, when I listen to what you say right now, it feels like you are needed in Singapore.
It
Because
feels
from
like-
now I know you only from that month in Tenerife, and also this month that we have spent together now here in Purple Valley, Goa. But my sensation of when I see you as humans is that you're extremely dedicated to the practice, and it's not only through the asana practice, though we are all asana lovers. I'm speaking for myself, but it's something more of a depth in you. So it feels like we are contributing with something in Singapore.
does.
Perhaps
And
this is where you're supposed to be.
it's very often difficult for us to be in Singapore because apart from our community, the whole society is a little different than us, I would say, influenced in a big way by China and influence from Malaysia. There are, of course, also Indians from Tamil and other parts of India. But culturally, it's quite far from us. Like even simple things like bringing up the child is very different than what I, brought with myself from Europe, with the understanding of the need of freedom and nature, and allowing child to grow at its own pace. In Singapore, things are very structured, and they start with education for kids really early. And many things are really performance oriented. So the achieving of goals, it's really important for them, which is exactly opposite to how we see bringing up a new human.
But beyond all that, I think I would say, as beautiful as it is, it comes with its own challenges of being and living in Singapore as foreigners, especially having to teach yoga where you don't bring in great amount of income and pay taxes to the government. So that makes things not so
That
easy
is
for us. So
challenging,
it's
but
challenging.
I think despite that, we kind of, at least for me, I feel like exactly what you said, that we might be needed there.
Yeah.
That this is more than just for our fun, because sometimes it's not fun at all, But it's more like a mission where we have to stay there for some more time to maybe help people understand the true essence of the practice, how we understand it, and then maybe we can move on. We'll see.
So when you have new students that come into your shala, what kind of students do you have? Either people or are there students that are interested in something beyond the asana? Or do you feel it's just people that are randomly finding you and they just
It's a
see another
mixed-
fitness
it's a
yoga
mixed
class?
crowd. Some who have already been practicing different kind of yoga or doing Ashtanga in mostly led class setup, and
We have many beginners,
many
many new
beginners
students
who
who
would
never
love,
did
who want to
yoga.
learn the practice. So we don't force the spiritual side to every student that walks in. it's kind of like a study group that we say it's there. If you want to join in, you're most welcome. So there is this constant flow of new people coming in, and to whoever the practice resonates to, they stick around, and it takes time for them to move towards the more deeper aspects of the practice, I guess. So we give them that space. We don't force things upon them.
And do you see a change in your students?
Oh, definitely,
in which
definitely.
way?
I think that every practitioner needs to be approached in a very individual way. So there happen people who come like already knowing what is Ashtanga, and they want to dedicate themselves to the daily 6 days a week practice because they want to find a deeper layer. But it's like 1 out of 20 new students that come. And the rest would be people who are just for the physicality, and that's what we share. So we teach them Surya Namaskar, we teach them standing postures. And most of the time, we'd see after maybe 1, 2, or 3 years, there is a little bit of shift. So when students start attending a workshop with us or go for the retreat with us, then usually they're like, so there's something more to that. So maybe there are some more benefits, or maybe they start discovering some change within themselves. And then they start, looking, asking, maybe reading some books and inquiring. And that's where we can take them from and where we can show them the whole beauty and depth of the practice.
I guess we eventually leave them with more questions than answers in the end.
Like with all the practitioners generally. Yeah. So in case you have a student that is a little bit curious about the way that you are teaching and what your emphasis in your teaching is, what would you say?
I would say it's mostly finding that empowerment in a student and making them believe in themselves, which most of us look down upon ourselves a lot. So it's like Martha mentioned a while ago, it's literally meeting the student where they are. And
I think one thing that is important for us when we teach is the cultivation of pratyahara, of the focus.
Yeah.
So through the drishti and through the focus on the breath, we don't really pay so much attention if student progresses in the postures. I mean, of course, everyone does at their own pace, but the way how their focus and their breath change over a period of time is for us the sign that student is ready and is receiving and is learning and is embracing the practice in its fullness. So we always try to keep the shala very silent, where we are kind of observing and letting students to find their own practice and giving them a subtle guidance instead of kind of like making the postures for them or putting them in the postures. For us, it's more about the inner journey that everyone has to make and the inner exploration of the breath and the inner healing which comes.
That being said, we are definitely there whenever they need us. But yes, it's a lot of really meeting the person where they are. And that takes an experienced eye and understanding people mostly. So
we have quite a few students working with injuries. We both work with injuries and learn how to maintain the daily practice. Even if you have your knee in the cast and you can't bend your legs, you can still do your Surya Namaskar. And we have students with shoulders injury, with spine injury.
It's all different types of bodies, people.
Beautiful to make them understand that injury is not there to stop you from daily practice. It actually requires you to show up every day. Even if you can't raise your arms, you can still breathe and you can still visualize the practice. And there's so many beautiful things. It's just a matter of coming and showing up.
So as a teacher, so how do you see your responsibility towards a student?
As a teacher...
Or what's the teacher's responsibility towards a student?
One simple word is kindness. Love and kindness is what teachers are meant to be personified of. And show that you care for them and you are there uh, to guide them through the path which they have to, of course, walk themselves. And as teachers, you just make sure that they see the path, and yeah, we are just like a torch that says, okay, that's the way. Let's walk. Maybe we walk together for a certain time, and maybe the rest of the way you walk alone. And even as teachers, we are still first and foremost students, and which is how I would like always for us to feel that we are always a constant work in progress. And like Baba Ramdas says, we are all walking each other home. And it is what it is at the end of the day.
One thing that motherhood made me realize is that women are so incredibly strong and very often underappreciated. Like we, as women, we often underappreciate each other and we underappreciate ourselves. And it's a super heroic act to have a child and to bring it up, you know. And we kind of neglect it and we kind of take it for granted that, yeah, she's got 3 kids and her practice is like that. But, to understand what it takes to have 3 kids, like we have 1 and it's been just the toughest 2 years of our life.
It was beautiful. The most
Yeah, it
beautiful
was.
journey. But it was sad.
But finding this inner strength and also support for women and more empathy and teach them how to be more empathic for themselves and find this time for themselves. Because especially in Singapore, women, they work a lot. They don't have maternity leave. Like in Europe, we have like 2 years. In Singapore, they got a couple of weeks and they go back to work most of the time not to lose it. And then they go home and they have these kids to attend to, and they often don't allow themselves to find this time for practice. So also I feel our mission or my mission is to make them understand like you deserve it and you have to give yourself so you can then give to others because you can't pour from an empty bucket. And that's been a journey. And I just there upstairs during the breakfast, I spoke with one woman who said, oh yeah, I've got 7 kids. And I was like, hello? And you should have like a golden medal on your neck, because that's like literally gigantic achievement. And we take it for granted. Like we appreciate men for being presidents and doing this and that, but women who had 7 kids, I mean, I can't even imagine delivering one after another every 2 years. It's like a super powerful and gigantic achievement. And yeah, I think it's something that we should speak more about and understand that having a family, being a wife, being a mother, being a sister, being a caring partner, whatever we do is such a difficult job.
It's beautiful.
And,
Yeah.
And that's something that we should keep reminding ourselves and students. And not every woman is as lucky and privileged as me to have a yoga teacher as a husband who is fully aware and share all the duties. Like in our relation, there was never a situation where he says like, okay, I'm off to work and you stay home with the child, because since she was a few months, he would stay home as well and go through the struggle of bottle feeding her so I could go out and teach. So there was always this equality between us, that we both teach, we have the shala, we are both parents. I never felt like I'm this single mother, and but most of the time it's not like that.
I also consider myself lucky for that, to be a part of my beautiful daughter's life and sharing these responsibilities of whatever it is. It's been the most amazing
He's
journey
been very
so
often
far.
saying that if he only could, he would breastfeed for me.
And there are certain days I actually wished if I could.
But there are certain physical limitations that we can't overcome, even with the best will. But yeah, that's so important. And I think also he, as a teacher, as a male teacher, should be verbalizing it much more towards the male practitioners, which can get so inspired from him, like how to be a perfect husband.
Far from perfect.
So yeah, that's the journey. And that's the yoga. That's the yoga off the mat that we go through every day. It's like what we spoke before. about what is the yogic life, what is this actual sadhana of us. It's not this 90 minutes of the mat, of bending the body, but it's how we are towards our partners, how consciously we bring up our kids about, maybe building a safe limits and borders. Like, I wouldn't let her drink this water, but as long as she's playing with it, we're all happy because she's learning and exploring. And I think giving this freedom to other person is something that we are all learning and exploring, and it's a constant process of improvement and journey into the self.
Again, Marta and John and Isabella, thank you so very much for joining us here at Purple Valley. It has been a pleasure to spend this hour together with you three. And I am extremely excited to have you teaching here in the month of June and July. So I'm hoping to see many of you coming here during the monsoon. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Namaste.
Thank you.